We tested one Jeep, 3 tire sizes, 33 inches, then 35, then 37. Same Jeep every time, same driver, same trails, same driveway it rolled out of every single morning for 6 years straight. Here's what makes this different from every other tire video you've probably already watched. This isn't 3 different Jeeps lined up in a parking lot for a camera. This is one Jeep, owned by one guy, tracked size by size, over 6 full years. My buddy Dale bought this Jeep back in 2019. He didn't buy 33-inch tires to make a point. He bought them because that's what fit under his fenders, with a small lift kit and nothing cut or trimmed. 2 years later, he moved up to 35s because one specific trail out west kept tearing his back bumper apart. 2 years after that, he jumped to 37s because, and I'm quoting him word for word, he just wanted to see what would happen. No plan, no sponsor. Nobody telling him what size to buy or when to buy it. Just a guy chasing a little more capability, one size at a time, and quietly paying for it as he went. I'm Marcus. 15 years fixing Jeeps. Mostly Wranglers, a handful of Gladiators mixed in. I want to be straight with you before we go any further. I don't spend much time under big trucks, the Silverados and F-150s of the world. That's just not where my hours go. But this Jeep, I've had my hands inside it at every single stage, on the same lift, with the same eyes, checking the same 4 things every time, no matter what size tire was bolted on. How the tread wears across the face of the tire, how the front axle joints and wheel bearings are holding up, what happens to gas mileage, and anything strange showing up outside the drivetrain that has no business being there yet. And out of these 3 tire sizes, one of them beat up this Jeep way more than the other 2 combined. Let's start where Dale started, because the beginning is the size almost nobody thinks twice about once it's on. 33-inch tires, stock front and rear axles. A small leveling kit, nothing extreme, factory gears, never touched, never upgraded. This is the tire size most Wrangler owners run and then completely forget about. And after watching this exact Jeep live on 33s for 2 full years and about 18,000 miles, I understand exactly why. When I looked closely at the tread, the wear was even across the whole width of the tire. No bald spots, no choppy, uneven pattern that tells you something underneath is fighting itself. That kind of clean, even wear tells you the suspension is doing its job the way the factory built it to do. I put the front axle up on my lift and turned the wheels all the way through their full swing, left to right. And the rubber boots covering the axle joints weren't stretching at any angle that worried me. Not even close. The front wheel bearings, the parts that let your wheels spin smooth without wobbling side to side, had 0 extra play in them for the mileage. None. Gas mileage barely dropped from what this Jeep got before Dale ever put a lift kit on it. He was still pulling close to 19 miles a gallon on the highway, and walking the rest of the Jeep, nothing else stood out. No worn bushings, no loose steering parts, nothing on my checklist that made me want to write anything down. Here's the thing, nobody actually tells you about running 33-inch tires. At this size, your Jeep is still doing exactly what it was built at the factory to do. You haven't asked the axles or the gears to work any harder than they were designed for. And yeah, I know that sounds boring to hear. It is boring, but boring is exactly the word you want your mechanic to use. Boring means nothing hiding underneath your Jeep is secretly working overtime just to keep up with the tires you bolted on. Then Dale moved up to 35-inch tires. And I need you to lean in a little here, because after how clean the 33s came back, I honestly walked into this next stage expecting more of the same story. Maybe a little more strain, maybe gas mileage would slip a bit. That's it, that's all I figured we'd find. That is not even close to what actually showed up on my lift. 35-inch tires on a Jeep running the exact same factory gears underneath, with nothing upgraded to match the bigger tire, is one of the most common setups on the road. Dale ran his rig exactly like that, no gear change, for a full year before he touched anything else. The tread wear still looked decent, so that part of the checklist held up fine. But the moment I got the front axle back on the lift and started cycling it through its full range, everything changed. Turning those wheels to full stretch, the rubber boots covering the axle joints were pulled tighter than anything I'd seen on the 33s. You could see the strain just by looking at it, no tools needed. And the front wheel bearings had picked up noticeable play that Dale hadn't said a single word to me about. Turns out his Jeep had been making a soft clicking sound every time he turned sharp in a parking lot. It had been doing that for months. He just quietly started turning wider, swinging the wheel a little earlier to avoid hearing it. He wasn't scared of the sound, he just changed the way he drove to work around it without ever really deciding to. I want you to stop and actually sit with that for a second, because that's not just a Dale thing. That is exactly what almost every one of us does with our own vehicles. A 35-inch tire weighs more and stands taller than a 33. Every single time that wheel turns, it's forcing the axle joint underneath to bend at a sharper angle than the factory ever designed it to handle, especially with gears that were never changed to match. That joint doesn't just snap all at once out of nowhere. It talks to you first. A soft click here, a faint noise there, and it is so easy, so natural, to just turn the radio up a little and drive right past it instead of ever asking what that sound is actually trying to tell you. So I pulled the front hubs apart to get a real look inside, not just a guess from the outside. Both axle joints showed early wear, small grooves starting to form in spots where they shouldn't be forming yet at this mileage. Nothing that was about to leave Dale stranded that particular week, but clearly more wear than I'd expect to see this early, on a Jeep still running the exact gears it left the factory with. Here's the number that actually matters to your wallet. Fixing both front axle shafts, plus the wheel bearings while everything's already apart anyway, runs somewhere between $1,100 and $1,500. Now here's the good part buried inside that scary number. Caught right now at this early stage, that's just a repair you schedule for a Saturday. You fix it in your own driveway on your own time. But ignore that same click for another year or two. Keep driving this Jeep the way it was actually being driven, hard, loaded down, out on real trails, and that little click turns into a fully snapped axle shaft. And it won't happen in your driveway. It'll happen 40 miles up a dirt trail with 0 bars on your phone, and now you're not calling a mechanic, you're calling a tow truck, and just hoping one can even reach you out there. The gas mileage backs up everything I just told you, just in a different language. Dale's highway number dropped from around 19 miles a gallon down to about 15. And that's not only because the tire itself got heavier. That's the factory gears working overtime, spinning a tire they were never built to spin, which means more heat building up, more strain on every part, more wear quietly piling up in places you can't see from the driver's seat. I want to be really clear about something before we move on. 35-inch tires are not a mistake. They're not dangerous to run. Thousands of Jeeps out there run this exact size for years with 0 problems at all. But 35 inches is the exact moment your Jeep stops doing what the factory built it to do and starts needing you to build around it. Mainly, that means changing the gears to actually match the tire. And here's the single biggest thing this whole test taught me. Not because 35-inch tires are bad. They're really not. It's because out of everything we checked, across all 3 sizes, this is the one finding that actually costs real money if nobody ever deals with it. Line it up next to what the other 2 sizes gave us. The 33s gave us nothing worth writing down at all. The 37s, and I promise I'll get there, gave us one small, cheap fix. This right here is an $1,100 to $1,500 repair, sitting there quietly, just waiting on anyone who decides that little click isn't worth a second thought. Last size, 37-inch tires. After what those 35s did to the front axle joints, I walked up to this stage of the test bracing myself for something even worse. By this point, Dale had already changed his gears, going with taller 4.56 gears specifically to fix the angle problem the 35s had exposed. So these 37s went onto a Jeep that had already been corrected once before the bigger tire ever touched the ground. And that mattered a lot more than I expected walking in. The tread wear on the 37s actually came back cleaner than I thought it would. Even and steady all the way across, which tells me the new gears were doing exactly the job they were supposed to do for how this bigger tire meets the road. The sidewalls flexed more under load this time around, because Dale picked a softer tire built more for grip on the trail than for lasting a long time on pavement, and that was a choice he made on purpose. It shows up as slightly faster wear on the highway. Nothing alarming, just a trade-off he knew he was making. And here's the part that genuinely caught me off guard. The axle joints, the same ones that looked stressed and strained on the 35s, actually looked better this time, even with a bigger, heavier tire bolted on. Why? Because the corrected gears meant those joints weren't bending at that same sharp, painful angle anymore. Same exact lesson as before. just fixed before the damage happened instead of after. Gas mileage took one more hit, dropping down into the low 13s on the highway. That number isn't coming back, not with this setup. That's simply the cost of pushing a tire this big through the wind on a boxy Jeep at highway speed. Outside the drivetrain, I did find one real thing worth mentioning. The front track bar bushing, a rubber piece that keeps your front axle lined up straight underneath the Jeep, had started showing some play. That's a known weak spot once you're carrying this much extra tire weight, and it's about a $200 fix if you catch it now, long before it turns into a nervous, wandering feeling in your steering wheel at highway speed that's a lot harder to track down later. But there's one thing on the 37s I can't fully explain yet, and I'd rather tell you that honestly than pretend I've got every single answer wrapped up neat. Above about 65 miles an hour, Dale feels a faint vibration coming through the steering wheel. It comes and it goes. It wasn't there on the 33s. It wasn't there on the 35s either. I checked the tire balance. I checked for any obvious wear pattern that would explain it. I didn't find anything on my lift that gives me a clean, confident answer. It might be a tire that's slightly out of round. It might just be what a 37-inch tire does to a boxy Jeep pushing through the air at speed. I'm not going to make up an answer just to hand you a tidy ending. This one is a flag, not a verdict. If it were my own Jeep sitting in my driveway, I'd rotate the tires and rebalance them before I spent one more dollar chasing anything bigger. So here's where all three sizes actually land, side by side. 33-inch tires, 3 clean checks, and nothing worth writing down at all. This is the size that lets your Jeep be a Jeep, without ever asking anything extra from the parts underneath it. 35-inch tires, the size that quietly put more stress on this Jeep than the other two sizes combined, mainly through the front axle joints and bearings, and the size hiding an $1,100 to $1,500 bill for anyone who decides to ignore that little click. 37-inch tires, the most capable out on the trail by a wide margin, but only because Dale fixed his gears first. And even then, there's still one open question about that highway vibration that I honestly haven't closed the book on yet. So which size actually wins here? If you're only asking which size is easiest on the parts underneath your Jeep, 33 inches wins, and it isn't even close. But that's a completely different question than which size actually gets the job done on the kind of trails Dale bought this Jeep to run in the first place. And I'm not going to pretend those two questions have the same answer just to wrap this up with a neat little bow. Here's the honest truth sitting underneath all of this. 35-inch tires are where most people get hurt financially, because that size looks like a small, harmless step up from 33, and it just isn't, not without fixing the gears to actually match it. If your Jeep is already sitting on 35s right now, running the same gears it came with from the factory, and you've caught yourself turning a little wider in parking lots just to avoid a sound you don't want to hear, that's not a coincidence. That's your Jeep talking to you, quietly, the same way the same way Dale's was. Get it looked at before it becomes a trailhead problem instead of a driveway one. If this saved you from making the same quiet mistake Dale almost made, or just handed you real numbers to actually plan your next build around before you go buy tires, that's exactly why I make these videos in the first place. Hit subscribe so you're here for the next one, before you're the one standing on the side of some trail 40 miles from pavement, explaining a snapped axle shaft to a tow truck driver who has no idea what a Rubicon even is.